Well, as we mentioned earlier, US media is reporting Israel has begun pumping seawater into tunnels in Gaza used by Hamas. They've cited unnamed US officials who say Israelis are testing the targeted flooding of tunnels on a limited basis. Israeli forces haven't commented on the report so far. Israel has claimed Hamas is using tunnels under Gaza to hide captives, fighters, and weapons. And in Washington earlier, US President Joe Biden was asked about the possibility there could still be some captives held inside the tunnels.
There is assertions being made that there's quite sure there are no hostages in any of these tunnels, but I don't know that for a fact. I do know that, though, every civilian death is an absolute tragedy, and Israel stated its intent, as I said, to match its words with its intent with actions. That's what I was talking about today.
Well, Jazeera's John Hendren joins us now live from Washington, D.C. So, John, what overall position is the Biden administration taking on the issue of flooding tunnels?
Well, Sammy, the Biden administration has been critical of the civilian deaths going on in Gaza, and President Biden called them indiscriminate, some of those attacks. So while Israel has tried to destroy some of those tunnels with airstrikes, liquid explosives, it's gone in there with robots, dogs, and drones, the administration seems less critical of the idea of flooding those tunnels with water if there are no captives there, as you heard the president talk about just in that soundbite. The concern seems to be that as long as civilians aren't killed, they don't mind those tunnels being flooded, so they cannot be used for Hamas fighters. There are environmental concerns, however, that have been brought up. You heard them a little bit earlier. There are concerns that salt water could get into the groundwater and the aquifers, that it could pollute farmland, and that it could cause structural problems to buildings. So there are certainly concerns there, but so far, all we've heard from the Biden administration is concerns that there might be captives kept in those tunnels. And you heard the president say he could not vouch for the fact that there are none down there.
All right, thanks so much. John Hendren. Let's bring in now Elijah Magnier. He's a military and political risk analyst, joins us live from Brussels. Good to have you with us. So first of all, let's start with the question of how well prepared or not might Hamas be for this kind of situation?
Thank you for having me. I don't think the situation of flooding the tunnels had any military value in favor of the Israelis or counterproductive for Hamas. First of all, we have seen how the Israelis have occupied the north of Gaza and part of the south, and yet in the north we have seen the most detrimental attacks against the Israeli occupation forces from the same area that Israel is occupying. Secondly, we've seen how the Israelis on television have flooded already a few tunnels, and we have seen that had no effect whatsoever on the military performance of Hamas, because they're still attacking the Israeli forces and they're inflicting very heavy casualties on them. Third, it helps the Israeli army to relax because they think they've flooded these tunnels, they blew them up, and then Hamas has been defeated. On the contrary, we've seen always again the attacks when the Israelis are very relaxed. That takes us to another point. What is the real intention of the Israelis? To kill all the soldier prisoners that are under the ground, because there are underground and they are above the ground. We have heard from the testimony of the Israeli captives that have been released that some of them were in tunnels and they walked for many kilometers, which means all these tunnels can be linked and cannot be linked. And this is why we've seen so many attacks from Hamas in small groups in different areas simultaneously. Now, the question is, what is Israel's final objective for the future of Gaza? So in what they are doing, they're causing a serious humanitarian disaster, because they are indeed shaking the foundation under the civilian infrastructure, which means they don't want the people that are living in Gaza to return, or they want to leave it as a no-man land, or perhaps if they agree on a ceasefire at a certain point, they want them first to suffer daily, secondly, to depend always on the supply of water that comes from the Israelis. Secondly, they are indeed destroying the natural water resources.
That's what if I could jump in, how much of a serious threat is this to Gaza's freshwater supply? How long do we know what the quantity of flooding that's going on? There have been various reports, but do we know how long how big the window is before one would be worried that even the freshwater resources that do exist in Gaza are likely to now be contaminated?
Well, the fresh source water is already very little in Gaza. We've seen how the United Nations is supplying, along with other humanitarian organizations, Gaza with fresh water because they don't have enough. Secondly, we've seen how the Israelis, on the first day of the attack, they said, we are cutting the water, committing a war crime and crime against humanity by indicating how much Gaza is in need of water and how the Israelis are aware how much Gaza needs them to supply the water. So being aware of the scarcity of the water is something that is extremely significant because it shows how the Israelis really give a damn about accountability or international law. Now, the area is very close to the sea because it's a strip and it is extended on the long of the shore. And when the situation is like that for any building, it means already that there is high potentiality to have salt water when people try to dig their own well. This is why
seepage becomes an issue. Elijah, what about to any hopes for reconstruction at some point? How much of a challenge would it be if there has been flooding of seawater through tunnels or through the infrastructure, underground infrastructure of Gaza?
Well, already when construction are built on sand is already requiring a lot of construction effort to consolidate the bases. And it's always important to consolidate the building when it is constructed. This is why Gaza needs a lot of cement that the Israelis were not providing. And this is why before the beginning of the war, we had more or less 100,000 Palestinians without home because they were delaying the construction for the lack of material. So by flooding the foundation of Gaza, it means adding more problems to the already existing problem. The advantage for Hamas is why they dig so many tunnels, because the earth is very soft. By being soft, it is detrimental for the civilians to have all this flood under their knees by the Israelis, who are very much aware what they are doing, but they really don't care. So they understand the damage they are causing to the Palestinian civilians.
All right, thank you so much, Elijah Magnier.